Alright, so it's time for layer 2 on our final painting. In the last tutorial, I painted the sky and tried to get a nice color blend going from yellow into white into blue. And in today's tutorial, what we're going to be working on is adding the second layer, which is our layer of clouds. So keep in mind, the goal for the clouds is to get a nice texture. We want to have the clouds larger at the top of the page and get smaller as they go down the page. We also want to have them darker at the top of each cloud and lighter at the bottom of each cloud. Not many materials are going to be required for this step. We're going to need the painting that you began last time. And then all we really need are the paints that we're going to be using and the sponge that we're going to be using. The only other supplies that you might need would be some newspaper for the tabletop, okay? And then maybe some paper on the side to either dab off the paint or to practice your clouds some more. One of the first tips that I'm going to give you, though, on our sky layer, what we were attempting to do was to get a really nice color blend between the colors. Now, if you have any hard edges between any of the color mixing, you want to make sure that you add clouds there so that we don't see that hard edge between the colors. I have the blue as the top of my painting and the yellow as the bottom of my painting, and again I have the paint set up here. Now when we did this last time, what we talked about was we were double loading the sponge on the first round, so I'm going to be taking white and red to start my clouds, and then I'm going to go back into it with a little bit of purple to make it darker at the top and a little bit of yellow to make it lighter at the bottom. So here we go. Get some white on. Get some red on. Don't start painting with all that paint on there. Sort of tap it off or dab it off onto the newspaper until you start to see the texture of the sponge coming through, and then move on to the paper. I'm ready to begin my second row of clouds, so I'm going to try to get them smaller in size. What that's going to mean for me is I'm going to dab down into the paint just like I did last time. I'm going to dab it down onto the newspaper just like I did the last time, but now this time I'm going to pinch the sponge together a little bit so that I get a sort of smaller range of clouds to happen. The second row is in. I've got the first row is very large. I've got the second row is much smaller, and now I've got to try to get some small ranges of clouds in this round. So I'm going to dab down into the paint just like we've been doing, and then I'm going to dab off onto the newspaper, and now I'm going to try to squeeze the sponge quite a bit this time to get a nice small range. Alright, so my initial layer of clouds is done. I have used a combination of red and white with the sponge to get the top clouds at the top of the page very nice and large, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller as they go down the page. Now I'm going to change some colors up a little bit. Using just one color at a time, I'm going to go back in and add little highlights and shadows into the clouds. So I'm going to use a different part of the sponge this time. I'm going to turn it around to a cleaner part of the sponge, and I'm going to start with yellow. I'm going to dab down into the yellow. I'm going to touch onto the newspaper again to make sure that the sponge texture begins to show. And along the bottom of the cloud, I'm going to start to light it up a little bit with these nice yellow highlights coming through the cloud. I'm going to continue that on the lower layers, making the yellow show up a little bit less because these clouds would be further away. Now I'm going to start to pinch the sponge quite a bit to get onto the lower level clouds. And there's so much yellow in the sky down here that the yellow will probably not show up that much anyway. But we'll see little touches of it in the clouds. Okay, the yellow's gone through all the clouds. Now I'm going to switch to a cleaner spot on the sponge, and then I'm going to begin with purple. So we dab down into the purple, dab it onto the newspaper to make sure that we get the sponge texture to begin to show, and then start to lightly put that in. As we get down to the lower layers of the clouds, I've got to pinch the sponge quite a bit to make sure that I get the purple at a small layer. I'm going to add one more layer in here, and I'm going to create a mixture of white and purple to make a nice sort of lavender color that I can add into the clouds as well. Too much paint, let's dab off on the newspaper. And there, I think we've got it done. Nice layer of clouds added on. And this layer is now complete. Once it dries, it's ready for the silhouette step.